Hey guys, Professor Bill Comic Book University and Critical Role, issue number 3, Vox Machina Origins. It's issue number 3 of 6. Okay, first off, let me get the good out of the way, and then I'm going to throw into the bad, all right? The good. This was really impressive. The way that they actually started off with a torture scene, I was shocked. Like the first couple pages I'm reading this, I'm like, are you actually advocating torture? Because as a former military guy, brother, I could tell you right now, thinking that, like they weren't even doing waterboarding, but there are people who think that waterboarding and things like that aren't torture. Wrong answer, Junior. All right. Getting a little bit of water up your nose when you're swimming in your pool is not the same as getting waterboarded. I can assure you of that. So, I'm seeing this torture scene. I was like, are you actually trying to propagate torture? The guys were actually advocating torture in this. And then a very short while later, they show that the guy who's doing the torture, who was advocating for it, is actually an absolute scumbag. Stabs one of the player characters. I imagine this is one of the player characters. He's one of the heroes, clearly, in the back with a poison where he is now going to be himself tortured for 12 hours before he dies if they don't give the antidote. And the only way they can get the antidote is by following out this mission. So they're one down, and they got to go out and they got to complete this mission for these guys. And the one guy actually goes and says, well, what about if somebody beats us to it? He's like, I find that people are usually motivated by things like this. So, hey, you still want to advocate for torture? This scene right here was literally my absolute favorite scene in the book. The problem, this happened in the beginning of the book. So unfortunately, it wasn't a big enough high that I was okay with the rest of the book. The story was slow. The art looked way too different. And I'm okay, you change artists or whatever, I get it. But like the characters look like they're gaunt. They look like they just went through some kind of a potato famine or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Just, no, it didn't look right. So here's the thing. Again, I like Critical Role. I don't watch Matt Mercer all the time like that. It's not like, every week when it comes out, oh, I'm there. No, that's not me. I've watched maybe 3 full episodes, and I can't tell you how many individual episodes I've watched. So I'm not the biggest fan, but yeah, I'm absolutely a fan. And I'm an avid role player, all right? But most importantly, I'm a comic book guy. And I'm telling you right now from the comic book sense, if these guys are only looking like if Matt Colville and by proxy Matt Mercer is trying to get into the comic book realm in any way, shape, or form, this is not the way to go. Look, comic book fans, we can forgive a bad issue. You know what I'm saying? And this wasn't even a bad issue. But what this is an obvious turn. We can spot this in a heartbeat. The artwork has dropped drastically. And nobody wants to hear an excuse for that. Nobody wants to hear how busy they are or they got this and that going on. Then don't do it. It's that simple. Don't do it. Comic book fans, saying like comic fans are the types who are going to scream at you for changing the movie a little bit from the comic. I mean, and you've been to the movies with somebody who's read the book. It doesn't even have to be a comic book. I read this book and it's so different from the movie, and the movie sucks because it's not like the book. Comic book fans can be worse than that. So, like, all I'm saying is this: the art has dropped drastically in this. The first little interaction in the beginning with the torture and all that, and the advocation thereof, or seemingly, was very cool. It's everything that happened afterwards. The pacing was just so off. It felt like an actual sitting down playing a role-playing game where, somebody's on their phone. It's like, dude, it's your turn. Oh, sorry, what just happened? You don't ask me what happened. That's disrespectful to the rest of the people in the party. What the frick, man? Pay attention. So, like, that's what it felt like reading the second half. The second 2/3 of this book. It has to pick up again. It has to get interesting again. Something serious has to happen, and the artist, everything has to get back to where they were in the first 2 issues. Has to. I like that the first page for the most part doesn't change, but it did kind of change. The text boxes were gone. That's the little kind of stuff that if you're trying to make a pattern, a wash, rinse, repeat kind of pattern thing here, then maybe consider just something along those lines. On top of that, I think I mentioned it before, but since there's nothing in the back of the book, and the book constantly always just ends, all 3 issues, it's like when they end, it's like you find out it ended because you turn the page and nothing else happens. There's no sense of closure. There's no sense of, in the next issue, at the very least, they could put down the character specs, of one of the characters in the game. At least one of the character specs. Just something about the game, something to make it like the Pathfinder comic books do. Something to make it interesting. And no, instead it just ends and that's it. It's over. Yeah. Welcome to the world of comic books. Welcome. I hope you get to stay a little while, but there are rules. Anyway, guys, for the sake of conversation, this comic book in and of itself, I'm giving it a C+. It was still enjoyable. I still enjoyed reading the comic book, but I'm seeing problems and I'm seeing one of the typical tropes that new comic book writers get into. And Critical Role doesn't need to fall, especially since they got in with Dark Horse. That's a pretty big company. That's one of the bigger of the non-main two, you know? So this really, it just, in my opinion, there's no excuse. This should have been better. So that being said, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, class dismissed.